Hey, today is Monday, June 23rd, and we get an opportunity to wake up and spend it together. So I trust you're waking up feeling refreshed and ready to begin this new day. It seems like these next couple of days in New Hampshire are going to be kind of a scorcher. But at least it's not raining. We're not complaining. And I'm glad to be able to spend it with you. Um, we are, this, can't believe it, this is the last week of our empty series. We're going to have another series beginning, um, the first week in July and take us through the summer. It's going to be called Show and Tell. It's going to be all about how this message is brought in various means, overcoming all kinds of hurdles in the world in which we are living. But one of the things that I do want to just share with you for a bit here is a story that I shared this past weekend, and it has everything to do with what we're studying this week, and that is week 14, Revelation chapter 21. Going to look at verses 1 through 7. And these are a couple of the points that I'm going to make. One is going to look at this restored glory that God has for us, and the fact that He's calling us to a very different reality, and that there is for us this hope of heaven. So along that along that line, I'd like to read the text for you, and then we'll get into our study. Okay, so we'll look at this text together here in um, in Revelation um, 21. It starts off this way. You see, Apostle John. He's following the pronouncement of judgment on those whose names did not appear in the book of life. Revelation chapter 20 is a sober moment when evil is judged. And following that, John's attention is then captured by another event. He says, I saw heaven and I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. Um, and this had everything to do now with this new formed creation that was about to take place. And and this idea of a new heaven and a new earth isn't something entirely new, is it? This new heaven and new earth has been a part of the Old Testament, you know, uh, record for a very long time. In fact, John sees now this confirmation of the hope that's expressed in the Old Testament, and one of the places that I'd like to bring you to is a passage that is found in Isaiah. Well, here we'll look at a couple of these together. First, this passage here that is reviewing for us the Revelation 21:1, right? New heaven, new earth. First heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. But there is this passage now that appears for you here in Isaiah 65. And so let me just read this for you. He says, this is the prophet Isaiah saying, "Behold, I will create new heavens and a new earth." This is what the Lord spoke to him, right? This is what God has given Isaiah as what the future is going to hold. He says, "I will create new heavens and a new earth. The former things will not be remembered, nor will they come to mind. But be glad and rejoice forever in what I will create. For I will create Jerusalem to be a delight and its people a joy. I will rejoice over Jerusalem and take delight in my people. The sound of weeping and of crying will be heard in it no more." So while Isaiah, along with Jeremiah, are forecasting what is to come, Jeremiah and Isaiah are all speaking about how the southern kingdom is going to be overrun, right? The Babylonians are going to come and they will pronounce judgment on the southern kingdom. But God says there is going to come this day, though, when I am going to create new heavens and a new earth. And so, one of the things that I want you to see here is that in this text, what we have written down for us is this reality now that this revelation is taking effect. That this is something that John sees now as having been expressed, right? So it represents God's response to his people's rebellion and his vision for a renewed future. God begins by expressing sorrow and frustration that despite his openness and readiness to be found, his people have turned away. They have engaged in idolatry and defiance. And yet, amidst this judgment, God is promising mercy to a faithful remnant who will inherit his blessing, and they are going to dwell in peace. The unfaithful, however, are going to face consequences for their choices. But here we find that God is speaking to us now, and there is this new heaven and this new earth that is being promised. And so there is also in your text this morning, as as we look to Revelation it's best explained um, in a couple of different ways here. As as you look, um, it the heaven, the earth, and the sea are part of this universe, right? That God has created. The sea, the land, heaven, right? Think about how that all appears in creation, where God turns around and he creates the heavens and the earth, right? And he fills them with animals, that fly, that animals that roam the earth, and he says, and the seas, where he also populates them with fish, right? The things that swim. So every environment has creatures that are tailor made just for it. But there's another interesting thing that we are to discover in this text about the sea, and that is that the sea is actually a symbol of evil. And it appears that in the new order, not only will the old creation be gone, but evil will be no more. There will no longer any uh, there was no longer any sea is is not about really water. It's about wickedness. The devil, the antichrist, the anti-Christian empire are all depicted in the book of Revelation as sea monsters, right? And noting nothing of that order is going to survive this new creation. So when Satan and all of his followers are cast into the sea, never to be remembered, it's saying, listen, there will no longer be any sea. There's going to be no longer any evil that is going to be a part of this new creation. So everything is going to be made new, and in this new order, there's going to be some really new changes that are going to be taking place. And so, what are some of those changes? Well, let's go back now to this passage in Revelation. Only now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to take you to verse 2, and here it says, "I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. That's a beautiful text. And here, what this text is saying to you and me, right? If we were to look at this passage, um, here we go. I saw the holy city coming down, right? Prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. Well, here is this text now. I want you to notice a couple of things. First, I want you to notice that this new heaven is coming down from God. In other words, how often when you think about heaven, do you think about I'm going to heaven, right? That when you die, I go to heaven. But notice this text here is saying that this new heaven, this new earth, it is going to come from God, but it's going to come down to us. Do you catch that? It's not that we're going to heaven. Heaven's coming to us. God is going to make his dwelling among men. And it's going to be this entirely new kind of experience. In fact, when it speaks about that this new Jerusalem is coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. There's a couple of things I want you to notice about this text that's kind of interesting. On the one part, as I mentioned, heaven's coming down. That's an entirely different way to think about heaven, isn't it? But this new Jerusalem, right, this new city is now likened as a bride. That's strange, right? It's not brick and mortar. It's not being described in this text as necessarily a place, but a person, right? So what you find is that when the angel shows John the New Jerusalem as the bride is the wife of the Lamb, right? Which is God's people, which is God's church. This church that he has been building since Jesus has ascended into heaven. I received an article. One of the members of our congregation, Sue Jenkins, missionary for more than 3 decades in Senegal, worked for Wycliffe and translated the Bible into their language. Sue Jenkins sent me an article saying that the fastest growing church in the world right now, and you're not going to believe this, is in Iran. Think about that. I know it's all in the news now, and it's got us, praying and asking God to do some really works of protecting and guiding and giving us discernment. But Iran has this growing church. And so it shouldn't really surprise us on one hand, because God says that he's going to build his church from all the nations of the world. That means that you can't just, create, some bad guy and wish them the worst. No, in every part of this world, you have those who will know Jesus. We have brothers and sisters throughout this world in regimes and in nations that are contrary, just like here in our country. You have faithful remnants of people who love Jesus and are not engaged in any kind of rebellion or anarchy. God knows who his people are. But notice here the bride, this new Jerusalem. This is what we read here. And you'll also find in verses 13 and 14 of John chapter 21 that the 12 tribes, the 12 apostles, are actually the gates and the foundations of the city. And so what we're saying here in this text is that the New Jerusalem it's not just a city, it's a city of people. And we are that temple. We are this new Jerusalem that God said is going to come amongst this new creation, right? This new heavens, this new earth that's coming down out of heaven. It's going to be comprised of what? Of all of the saints who know God. There is no more evil in this world. There's no more. Yeah, well, we'll get to it in a minute, but it's completely changed. But the other side of this is what is also listed for us in in verse 3, as we're going to find out here, right? In in verse 3, we find it says, "I heard a loud voice from the throne, saying, 'Now the dwelling of God is with men, and He will live with them. They will be His people, and God Himself will be their God. Will be their God.'" So in this text now, we realize that not only is the city comprised of people, but it's also this dwelling where God is going to reside with us. And so what we find is that this whole idea of a new creation, of a new heaven and a new earth, is going to be a return to glory. Do you catch that? This is what God created in the very first place. We're going all the way back to the beginning of Genesis, where we started our study, where God creates a heaven and an earth out of nothing, and He sees that it is good. There is all that is needed to sustain life. God's presence is there. Life is there, and and yet, while we're tempted to look at that early creation as this beautiful garden, you do remember Satan was in it. There was a serpent who was whispering in the ear of Adam and Eve. Yeah, but in this new creation, this new heaven, new earth, there's going to be no longer any sea, right? There is going to be no more wickedness that's in this city. And so John is seeing that everything is going to return to this glorious state, a place of peace and perfection, a life that's going to be found in communion with God, who is the creator and sustainer of all things. Now, if you said that you have a new creation and a new earth, it's because the first earth, the first heaven, something went wrong, right? And we know what that is, right? Sin enters the world, and as a result, this world is under judgment. There is a passage that that is found in Romans chapter 8. It speaks about creation, and it speaks about God making something new. And what I'd like to do is just have you maybe turn in your Bibles to Romans chapter 8. And if you look at Romans chapter 8, the chapter opens up right with us recognizing that there is going to be this new heaven and this new earth. Let me just let me bring this up for you so that we could read it together. In Romans chapter 8, just go down to about uh, to about 18. So in Revelation, book of Romans, and chapter 8, and if you look at verse 18, this is what Paul writes here. He says to them, he says, I I consider, he says, that our present sufferings are not worth comparing um, to here. I'm sorry, my everything's just a little delayed in coming up. Here we go. It says, I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. The creation waits in eager expectation for the sons of God to be revealed. For the creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but by the will of him who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into the glorious freedom of the children of God. In Romans 8:18 through 21, here are verses that saying, listen, this world, right, is broken. And it says the creation itself is looking forward to the day when it will experience this liberation, right? This new heaven, new earth, all things being made new. But notice in verse 20 of Romans 8, it says the creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but by the will of him who subjected it. Meaning God judged the world because of sin. And so what was meant to live eternally, now it began to show signs of its own corruption. It dies. Just like now we're living in a season, right, where everything is coming back to life. But it's not long before the winter comes, and you see how, things pass away. It becomes this metaphor for life itself. But this creation, while it's been subjected to this frustration, it is hoping, look what it says in verse 21, that the creation itself is going to be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into the glorious freedom of the children of God. And so now this new creation, this new earth is going to reveal the people of God, right? The bride of Christ, the church, is going to come into this city that God has created. And it says all things are made new in that moment. So that's why when I began with you this morning, I put down here that this is all about restoring glory. What God created in the beginning, now God is about to take to this level of perfection that you and I can only dream about. And that's where this very different kind of reality now comes in. So what I like for you to do here is look at verse 4. In verse 4, it says, when wipe every tear from their eyes, there will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. Isn't that interesting? That now in this world we're going to experience the passing of former realities. Like in this world, we know all about tears, don't we? We know all about pain. We know all about death. It's a part of our everyday experience. I shared with the congregation on the weekend that I did a funeral for a man named Joe Kapaski. Great guy, so involved, not just at our church, but really became like an emissary to the body of Christ. He and his wife Jeannie, they started a number of different kinds of ministries, from divorce care to Alpha, and they did it in a Catholic diocese. They did it in a number of churches up north here in New Hampshire. Very, very busy, doing all kinds of mission trips. They were very, very engaged. And so no doubt Joe is in heaven. He's experiencing this now, right? But in the world, we were there, celebrating his life and looking forward to this hope. But Jeannie's still missing her husband. Like he's not coming back. She'll see him again, but for this moment, there are tears, right? There is pain. And yet here's a text that is saying all of this is going to be taken away. that there is going to be a new reality where there is going to be no more death, no more mourning, or crying or pain, that this old order of things has passed away. So what does this future hold? The future in heaven is holding for us not only a restoration of glory that God began with, but now this is going to be a very different kind of a world, a very different kind of experience, a different reality for you and me. Uh, I You could use your imagination, but have you ever woken up to a perfect world? It's something that we could just dream about. But here, I want you to take another look. I want you to see here that in Revelation 5, he says, "He who is seated on the throne said, I am making everything new." He says, "I want you to write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true." So what God is saying to you and me is, I am going to the time for recreation has arrived, that the truthfulness of his teaching is going to be witnessed by everyone. And not only that he's saying, listen, I'm telling you this, and he says, and I do not lie. This is what the future is holding for those who know me. And then he goes on, and in verse 6, he says, "It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To him who is thirsty, I will give to drink without cost from the spring of the water of life." And so not only is everything that God's saying about the future based on his, truthfulness, but he says he's going to finish what he started. It is done now, he says. That he is the Alpha and the Omega, right? Alpha and Omega, those are the first and last letters in the Greek alphabet. So what he's basically saying is, I am everything from A to Z, everything. In other words, God is sovereign over all of history, and he is able to satisfy our thirst for life. So what do we find here? We find heaven as a restoration of glory. Heaven is going to, it's going to introduce a very different world, a very different reality from one that we're used to in this broken world. And heaven, well, it says here, it's our hope, because he promises it based on his word. He says, I'm going to finish this. That I'm going to finish what I started. I'm sovereign over all of history, and I will satisfy you with life. So here, just in our opening this Monday morning, we come to a very neat place, right? Where God is now promising us something very, very good. Well, we're going to spend the rest of this week talking a little bit more about heaven, and so I'm looking forward to that. But thank you for joining me on this Monday, June 23rd, and I look forward to spending more time with you again tomorrow. But till then, you go out, seize the day, remembering that God is good all the time. Maybe set your mind on things above for today. It's meant to give us a sense of joy and hope and confidence. Thanks so much for joining me this morning. Look forward to seeing you guys again tomorrow. God bless.